there, honeybees. Welcome to another segment of Self-Love September. I'm very excited because today I'm going to be talking you through some of the practicalities, the whys and the wherefores, etc. of using poppets in your self-love practice, your ritual and magical self-love practice. I touched on this a little bit in the self-love rituals video that I did last year for SLS. It was the opening video, I believe, of the series, and there was a lot of interest in the comments down below regarding further information on using poppets for self-love, and I am here this year to provide that information to you. I think poppets can be an amazing way to enhance your self-love practice, and I want to start right off the bat by saying that if you're not witchy, if you do not identify as a witch, if you are if the idea of poppets doesn't appeal to you and you're watching this thinking, why have I clicked on this? This has got nothing to do with me. You might want to stick around because it's not all going to be about witchcraft. It's not all going to be about spellcraft. I personally feel that the concept of sympathetic magic and the tools that are used in sympathetic magic can be adequately used in ritual. They can be used to formulate a language of symbolism around the object for your self-love journey. They can be really useful for you psycho-spiritually. They don't necessarily have to be used magically. So you might find that you do benefit from this video in some way, even if you do not necessarily consider yourself as being someone who would ever cast a spell using a poppet or anything like that. I would say just give yourself an opportunity to take on the information, and if the information doesn't resonate with you, if you don't get anything from it that you feel you could use, at least you've opened your mind to it. But I do think there's a fair few people out there who maybe feel they can't access poppets and that poppets are not relevant to them because they're not witches, and actually it could be super relevant and it could be something really useful. It could be a level up for you in your self-love practice if you are willing to go a little bit outside of the box. Without further ado, darlings, let me introduce you to my very dog-eared, very well-loved, very well-used, battered, practically dead poppet. This is my poppet that I've had for the longest time. I made it myself. I've used it in all kinds of different rituals, all kinds of different self-love rites, magic spells, etc. It is a representation of me. I made it from an old pillowcase that I drew a human figure on the pillowcase and then I cut around it so that I ended up, with the two sides of the pillowcase having two sides of the human figure, and then I just stitched it together and stuffed it with some cotton wool and some saliva, some blood, some hair and some fingernails from me, and it then became a representation of me. That is basically what a poppet is. It is a representation of usually a human or an animal upon whom you want to bestow some righteous high vibe energy, or against whom you want to protect yourself. So that's really the point of a poppet, essentially. It's not always going to be a human figure, but most of the time it's going to be a human figure. There are people that work with abstract poppets. There are people that work with, hearts and things like that to represent their heart, or to represent the heart of someone who's brokenhearted, or someone that a love spell is being, done on, or something. There's other ways to do it. You don't have to have a human form. But I think for the purposes of self-love poppet usage, it's really makes the most sense to have a human form, something that represents you, something that you can focus your energy and your intention on, externalizing it into something that is a representation of your being and your body. As you can see, my poppet is very crudely made, and actually it does need a little bit of restitching now, to be honest. It's a little bit battered. I love it very, very dearly, and I have really developed such an incredible relationship with it over the course of time. It doesn't look like me, it doesn't look like anyone, but because it's got my hair inside it, my fingernails, etc., and because I consecrated it for the purpose of using it for spellcraft and ritual based around self-love and based around healing, I feel that I have a very strong relationship with it over the course of time. And I'm glad that I am showing you this poppet because I want you to understand that it doesn't need to be anything elaborate. It doesn't need to be anything complex. It doesn't need to be something that takes a lot of time or costs a lot of money. You can make poppets in all kinds of different ways. You can fashion them like I did from an old pillowcase or an old piece of clothing. Just stuff it with some cotton wool. I mean, I had cotton wool just lying around in my bathroom or something similar. You can stuff it with all kinds of things. You can put lavender in it, and actually I did put some lavender heads inside this one, and it did make it smell good. said for the longest time. You can put all kinds of things in it. You just basically draw around the material, tack it up together with the tacking pins, cut around it, and then sew it crudely as you like. You don't need a machine, you don't need any of that. You can staple it, you can glue gun it, you can do any of that stuff. You don't need to be like an award-winning craft artist to make a poppet. You can fashion a poppet as crudely and as homegrown as you like and as you need, essentially. You don't need to use materials. You can definitely draw out an image of yourself on a piece of paper and use that. There are lots of different ways that you can create an image of yourself, a representation that you can externalize from yourself so that you can then bestow the self-loving energy onto it and into it, which is a lot of what we're going to be talking about today with this video. You might not necessarily want to make your own poppet. You might feel that you can use something that is already lying around your house, or you might want to purchase a poppet from a maker of poppets. It's totally up to you. I have a poppet that I use for shadow work sometimes that I did not make. This little one right here. This is just a little soft teddy that I bought from a shop around the time of Samhain a few years ago, and I loved it, and I just thought I want that to spend the rest of its life with me. It's absolutely precious. And then I commandeered it for the purposes of some shadow work poppet magic, and that is its little job now. I got a piece of my hair and I threaded it through the stitching in the back, but I did not make it. I simply claimed it for myself. I consecrated it and said, this will be my poppet for shadow work endeavours. So you don't always have to be making your own. You can find something that's lying around, particularly if you feel that you want to experiment with the whole idea of poppet ritual or playing with poppets and you're not sure if it's going to float your boat. You're probably not going to want to necessarily make something that's going to take oodles of time. So if you do have something lying around, or if you can make something in a quick and easy way, just to experiment and see if you like the concept, then that would be a good idea. Of course, there are poppets that are very expertly made. There's a lot of time put into them. There's also a lot of expense has gone into them as well. And those are equally amazing poppets. The point I'm trying to make is it's a level playing field. Do not feel that you have to make something glorious, otherwise you can't do a poppet ritual or perform poppet magic. Nothing could be further from the truth. It can be crude, it can be DIY, it can be homegrown. Just letting you know, just really underlining that now. Poppets do usually take the form of a human being, and it's a representation therein of the human being that you want to bestow energy to, that you want to send something to, essentially. I know that popularly people have thought of poppets as being for malicious magic and hexes or bindings, and that's all very possible with poppets. It's a very useful form, actually, of magic for things like that. Obviously, I'm not going to be talking about any of that within the context of this video. I'm talking about how we can download juicy self-love vibes into the doll and therefore, you know, kind of conjure them up within yourself and develop that foundation of self-love within yourself. It's about externalizing your image of you so that you can fixate upon it temporarily and bestow to it all of these beautiful, loving things that it might be missing, it might be longing for, it might be needing. You can work with an abstract shape. You do not have to use the human form. You can work with the shape of a heart if you want to, or something like that. But I think for self-love, ritual and magic, that the human form works best. I particularly like to work with a poppet that has the human form because for me, a lot of the self-love work that I do with the poppet is based around my chronic pain and based around my PMT and things like that. So just areas where I have tension in the body, areas where I regularly feel pain in the body. So I like to actually have the locations of the human form on my poppet so I can direct love and energy and healing to those places. And I think that's going to make sense to a lot of you, that actually the human form is usually the right way to go. And also we can use the human form symbolically. So if we have issues with our mindset, we can focus on the head. If we have issues with our heart, heartbreak, etc., trauma, we can focus on the heart right here. If we have issues with our sexual life or our creative life, you know, we can maybe go through the chakra system and work it like that. And as I said, for people with chronic pain or injury, it's really good to direct energy and intention to specific parts of the body. It's also easier for the brain to pick up on the fact that, yeah, okay, this is a representation of you. You've put your skin in it, you've put your hair in it, you've done all that stuff, all that witchy woo-woo weirdness, and you have somehow made it into a representation of you. I get that, I'm going with it, let's move on. And so your brain is not in resistance to the idea of the poppet representing you. Now, I do want to say that it might take you a while to bond with your poppet and to really feel connected to it, and that's completely normal. You might want to spend a few days with your poppet just sitting around. It might be sitting on your bed, sitting on your dresser, sitting on your desk, and you might just want to look over at it and keep connecting with it in your brain and keep thinking of it as this object that you're going to be using for some self-love ritual or some self-love exploration or some spellcraft, whatever flavor you prefer. For some people, it does take a few days or a few weeks to get used to the idea of using an object like this and thinking of it as a representation of you. I feel that for me, as long as I've got something inside the poppet or on the poppet that is a stamp, that is a representation of me, that has my DNA in it if possible, then I'm good to go. I consecrate the poppet for the purpose and the intention that I have brought it to being for, and then I feel very strongly confident that I can use it as a magical object from there on in. You might not necessarily have the same experience. You might feel that you do need to have a bit more bonding time. You might feel that you need to take some time to figure out what you want the poppet to look like, or what kind of object you want to put in it, or maybe sew on it, or whatever the case may be, so that you feel that it is truly something that you can work with. And like I said, there's nothing wrong with spending money on getting somebody to create a poppet for you, having one specially designed, but please don't feel that you need to do that. There is no way that you need to do that. I do very effective poppet magic and ritual with just very crude things that I made for myself. The other thing that I want to make sure that I draw your attention to, doll faces, is that your poppet does not have to be a representation of you in your present day reality. It can be a representation of you at a younger age. So if you feel that a lot of your self-love work is to do with inner child healing, for example, you might feel that you want to have a self-love poppet that is representative of your 6-year-old self, your 15-year-old self, your 10-year-old self, whatever it might be. Now, some people can definitely repurpose their poppets, and they can definitely feel as though they can imagine that their poppet is different ages. For instance, with this one, which is my Old Faithful, I've had this for a long time, I've done a lot of work with it. I definitely feel that I could reimagine this poppet as being a younger version of me. I definitely feel that I would not have to associate it with being one specific age. I think I could move around, and if I needed to do some inner child healing, or if I needed to focus on a specific time in my life, it could be used for that. But I do also have a poppet that I made especially for inner child work, and that is this poppet right here. And this poppet has been very useful for me in a number of ways. It links me in immediately to the much younger version of me. I remember when I thought about making a poppet specifically for a representation of baby me, if you will, it was when I was learning a lot about perinatal experiences and perinatal trauma. I was reading a lot of Stanislav Grof, can you blame me? And I was thinking, I had a very traumatic birth. My mother has recounted it for me several times, and it's interesting actually. I was not placed into my mother's arms when I was born. I was taken away. It was all very dramatic. I was put in an incubator and all that kind of thing. And over the course of time, I have thought of that as being quite symbolic, an interesting way for me specifically to have entered the world. And I was doing reading, and I was thinking about my young experiences and the conditioning that I was taking on as a young child. And I thought to myself, it would be cool to have something that just represents the very young version of me, and I can connect with that straight away. So that's why I made this. So I want to let you know that there are options. There are options for poppets for different things. You can have a poppet specifically for self-love, but you don't have to if you don't want to. You can have a whole gang. I've introduced you to some of my gang already. You might feel a little bit weird working with a poppet at first if you've never done so before. And if you've only ever worked with a poppet to represent someone else, you might feel a little bit weird when the poppet is representative of you. But stick with it, go with it. Accept that it might feel a little bit crunchy and a little bit weird and wonky at first, but know that it is so worthwhile, honestly. I think the payoff that you can get from working with a poppet is really something, and it's not going to be for everybody. It's not going to flick everybody's switch, fair enough. But I do feel that it's useful to be able to externalize your sense of self and then place it into an object and then temporarily download your feelings into that object or interface with that object. I think all of these things are really useful. So, you know, you might feel a little bit uncomfortable at first. Maybe like the first time you did a spell, you might have felt uncomfortable then, or the first time you sat meditation, or the first time you had a break from your phone and just didn't allow yourself to pick it up, you'd feel awkward. Or maybe you feel awkward when you go to the cinema by yourself or for lunch by yourself. Some people feel awkward then. Just think of it as one of those awkward things that you've got to walk through in order to get to the good stuff. Think of it as a challenge to push yourself slightly out of your comfort zone. So if you're looking at a thing that you've created that's a representation of you and you're thinking, what the fuck am I doing? Stay with it. Try to sustain that sense of desire to know whether or not this could work for you. So now you've got your poppet, the world is your oyster. You can do so many different things with it to enhance your journey of self-love. I'm just going to talk about some of the things that you can do to have a good time with your poppet and see whether or not you can add it to your toolkit when it comes to the self-love journey. Many people recognize that they were deprived of certain things at certain points on the life journey, whether it was childhood, whether it wasn't. It's not always childhood, but that's definitely a key area where people feel they were deprived of certain things. They were deprived of validation, they were deprived of support, they were deprived of encouragement. So it obviously makes sense that you would use your self-love poppet to bestow upon that younger version of yourself the support, the encouragement, etc., that you didn't receive then. And there is something very profound about doing this. And I will say that when I started working with my young inner child poppet that was specifically for this kind of work, I would put it to me and rock it and talk to it and sing to it. And it was shamanic, guys. It was fucking serious. I mean, it was profound. It was actually profound. And that's why I say stick with your weird feeling and try to get over the hump, because actually something really transpersonal and special and precious can happen if you know, sort of ride out any icky feeling that you have, so you can stick with it and really get the meat and potatoes from it. Because honestly, it really was very profound, and it made me go down a lot of different avenues in my mind and connect a lot of different things together that I needed to connect together. And I felt nurtured. I felt nurtured at the core of my being through imagining that this was little baby Kellyanne. And it's so weird, the things you say to the internet, the things that you actually admit to and describe, but this is the nature of what I do. I have wanted, ever since I joined YouTube in 2012 and started talking about my experiences, to offer, if I can, some permission slips to do work that is really key and really core, but maybe at the same time just falls outside of what's considered to be normal. And it works for me, and it works for a lot of people. So you might want to think about what you were deprived of. You might want to say loving words to your poppet. You might want to say validating words. You might want to encourage your poppet. You might want to say the very things to your poppet that you always wished your parents would say to you. You might want to take your poppet on a little adventure. Pop it in your bag, take it to the beach, take it on a walk. You don't need to get it out. You can just have that feeling that you are taking the younger version of yourself with you, or the deprived version of you that you feel isn't getting those experiences or is afraid of those experiences. You can definitely rock your poppet. You can sing to your poppet. You can play music to your poppet. You can do all that kind of thing. You can do any amount of nurturing things with it. You can sort of move your hands over it and imagine a healing, restorative white light just going into the poppet, and you can say powerful healing words as you do that. When we start to address the poppet, interact with the poppet, thinking of it as a version of us and giving it the things that we sorely need, that we are missing, that we need to come into contact with, that's the point where ritual and spellcraft merge for me, I think. For me, ritual has always been about the confirmation of something that I know exists, or the openness to bring something into existence. But it's not about sending my energy and intention out. For me, a spell is different. It's about gathering my energy, balling it up and shooting it towards the bullseye. So I actually know what I want to achieve and I want to send my energy there. So ritual and spellcraft are different for me, but there are definitely some blurred lines for sure. So with things like moving your hands over the poppet, visualizing white light, saying empowering words and stuff like that, you could say that's more ritualistic than it is spellcraft oriented, because maybe you're not visualizing a specific intention, you're just focusing on the poppet as a symbol of you, and you are giving yourself the love and the encouragement, etc., that is needed. But I definitely think there's a spellcrafty aspect to it, and I think that the results that I've received from doing things like that definitely tell me that there's an overlap between ritual and magic for sure. You can be the mentor, the guardian, the protector, the mother, the father, the parent to your poppet. When you are interacting with your poppet, you can set up a dynamic which you feel may have been lacking at some point in your life or may be lacking now. You can be the archetype, the icon to your poppet if you want. It depends how far you want to take it, and how your brain works and how your imagination works. If you can wrap yourself around the idea that this is a symbol of you, and think about how far you could take that in terms of what you could bestow upon it, what you could give to it in terms of experiences, what you could say to it, then really I think the sky is the limit, honestly. The poppet world is your oyster. Let me talk to you a little bit about dressing your poppet and putting things on your poppet, etc., and having that be a very magical way to interact with it and use it. There are so many ways that you can access the power of the poppet by what you put onto it and what you put into it and what you put around it, okay? And the majority of the work that I do with my poppet is basically like that. So it's using something symbolically to achieve something that I want to bring into my reality. So I do a number of things. I have cord that I keep in my altar drawer, and I use the cord to tie around certain parts of the poppet. And while I do that, I might say things, I might say an incantation if it is a spell. If it's more of a ritual, I might speak words of power or speak spontaneously. The cord is to represent all kinds of different things. When I was doing a lot of work on my lower back pain, I would tie the cord around it, and I would envision that the cord was giving me strength and stability around my L4, which is where my injury is. And I would really sort of put a lot of healing and a lot of love and sacred intention into that area right at the bottom of the spine. In other ways, I have used the cord to kind of cut off certain things. So say I want to cut off from a bad habit that I'm continuously engaging in, or I want to step away from a relationship that I feel is unhealthy. I might wrap the cord around my head, or wrap the cord around the heart part of me, or something like that, or maybe around the hand if I feel I'm reaching out too much to somebody and I want to make sure that I can pull back and I can be self-contained. I might wrap around the hand. And as I'm doing that, I'm speaking out my intentions. I'm saying that I intend to step away and to nourish myself and to not let myself continue with the bad habit or the negative relationship or whatever it is. So there's lots of ways that cord can be used really well. So if you've got some wool, if you've got some string, if you've got some thread, anything like that, that can be used to stop you from doing certain things, but also to keep certain things in, to bind your intention, to strengthen, to fortify. So it can be to cut off, to distance, to protect, but it can also be to suck in and to immerse. You really have to allow your mind to do what it needs to do to get the correct effect. I like to pour things over the poppet and kind of drop things onto the poppet. So let me just give you a couple of examples. So this is just a sort of herb mix that was made by a local witch. And just imagine that you have got your poppet on the floor and you've got your candles and your incense going, whatever you want to do. Imagine that you have a herb mixture that you've made or purchased that has been, that's intended for a specific thing to do with your self-love journey. And you are just pouring it onto the poppet as you go along, So you are just really using the herb mixture as a way to immerse the poppet in whatever it is that you want to bestow upon it, or whatever it is that you want to bring its attention to. Another example is, here is some rock rose flower remedy from my altar. There is a pipette inside this bottle, so you can see that there is a little dripper inside the bottle. I have oftentimes utilised pipettes using my own sort of concoctions or things that I've purchased from other witches or whatever it might be, and I have dropped that onto the poppet as I have been saying words of power and just putting sacred intention into the poppet, and that is really useful and often makes the poppet smell really nice, which is great. So you can use that as well. You can sprinkle things onto it, you can sprinkle liquids onto it, whatever you want to do. You can also use pins. Now, obviously, pins are more corresponded in people's minds with, I think, voodoo dolls. There's a lot more to voodoo dolls than I think most people are aware of, obviously. But I think when people think about putting pins in dolls, they regularly associate that with causing pain and causing harm in some way. For me, I feel like pins actually can be a statement of my commitment, though. I actually use words with my poppets, and I'll give you some examples here. Change, peace, excitement. These are words that I've just pulled out from underneath my altar space so I can show you. Joy. I really didn't want to do cutaways for this video, darling, so I'm just showing you here. I like to use words, and I like to put the words on the poppet and around the poppet if I'm trying to craft a particular experience for myself, or I'm trying to bring certain things in. Now, the pins can be useful to pin the words to the poppet, because I feel that when I stab the pin through, it's like I'm really driving the point home. It's like I'm saying, I mean this, I want this, I'm bringing it in. So for me, it's not really associated overly with the idea of inflicting pain or creating some form of displeasure. I actually like it as a way to drive home the sense of focus and to represent my seriousness. But you know, your mileage is going to vary on that. You might not want to do that. It's up to you. Don't be afraid to combine your poppet with other tools that you might have in your magical or spiritual collection. For me, I often like to use my runes to place around my poppet to represent different things that I want to bring into my life, or I want to take out of my life, and I will choose a formation that feels right for what it is that I want to reduce and what it is that I want to increase. So that's something that you can do. I also have a mini tarot deck. In fact, I have quite a few mini tarot decks, darlings. Teeny tiny Rider-Waite-Smith, and this can be really useful for placing around the poppet, particularly if I want to do magic at specific lunar phases and I'm going to leave the poppet out and I have the cards all around, and oh, it just looks so gorgeous. Isn't it joyful being a witch? God, I can't believe so many people have a problem with it. It's literally one of the most fizzy parts of my life. Anyway, the other thing that you can do with tarot decks or tarot cards, or even just images that you take from magazines, anything like that, is you can create a journey for the poppet to go on. So you could lay out, let's say, for example, let's just use tarot cards as an example. You can lay out various cards on the ground to represent the journey that you want to take in the coming weeks or the coming months or the coming years. And then you can walk the poppet along, interacting with every card as you go and stating aloud your intention to manifest those different things that the cards are representative of. I love doing that. I've actually done a tarot staircase for my poppet before, where I have symbolized where I am in the present, feeling maybe a bit crappy, maybe a bit dodgy, and then I've symbolized the steps that I think I need to take to get to where I want to go. And then I have walked along the floor, the poppet up the stairs, and every step I've said, I acknowledge that at this point I'm going to need to do this, and I'm going to bring all of my intention to that. And then at this point, this is going to happen, and I'm going to be there for that, and I'm going to be conscious of that, and I'm going to be bringing my power to it. So I'm talking myself through the story of the future I want to create at the time as I'm walking the poppet up the stairs of tarot. That's a little something that might be useful to people. I don't know, it's something that I came up with that I thought was really good. I love doing that. It really helps. You can incubate your poppet if you want to and take it through a birth process. This is a really interesting thing to do with it. So you might want to wrap it up in a blanket and put it inside a box, and then, you know, put something on top of the box or whatever, and decide that, okay, this is an incubation period for me. This is a time of healing. This is a time of gestation. I'm not where I want to be yet, but at a certain point when I feel that I'm ready to be born into this new self or whatever, I'm going to birth this poppet into existence. That could be an interesting thing to do. You can permanently tattoo your poppet if you want to. If you are into tattoos, if you appreciate the way that they basically symbolize different points on the life journey, then you can do that with your poppet if you want to. You can make your poppet into an ongoing artistic exploration for you, and you can put different things on it, and then you can think to yourself, oh yeah, that was when I was going through that in my life, and that was when I was going through that. So your poppet doesn't have to stay the same. You can stitch things onto it, you can write things on it. You can do all kinds of stuff to it to symbolise that your journey is moving forward and your poppet is moving forward with you. You can read to your poppet, you can tuck your poppet into a bed, you can do any number of things to feel like this little representation of you is getting something that you sorely need. If you want to manifest a specific thing, if you want something to come through in your life, either in your consciousness or in the external reality around you, use your poppet as the central focus of that spell. Put your poppet in the middle of the floor and then bring things in that symbolise the journey that you're going to go on or the thing that is going to happen, and really use your connection with the poppet to amp up that magic. You might want to do more ritual things around your poppet or psycho-spiritual things around your poppet. I think it's all valid, and I think that sometimes the self-love journey can be very difficult. A lot of people find it very hard to know where to start. A lot of people feel like they cannot bestow love onto themselves, and sometimes it is useful to have that externalized symbol of yourself to bestow love onto. It's almost a little bit of a shortcut. It cuts out that toxic middleman that tells you that you cannot give love to yourself. And like I said at the beginning of this video, darlings, it's not going to work for everybody, but I really felt like I wanted to share at least some of the ways in which you can get ritualistic and magical with poppets. And I really hope that this serves the self-love journey for at least some of you, and share it around if you feel like there's somebody that might need to get into it as well, or has been thinking of getting into it and might want some ideas. Let them know. So much love and self-love. Until next time, darlings, blessed be. In the woods, under dust, and the fairy